Penguin Audio presents Home to Holly Springs, written by Jan Karon. Read by Scott Sowers. Chapter 1. A preacher with a lead foot, driving a red Mustang convertible with the top down, could make a state patrolman pretty testy. He checked the rearview mirror. Though he was the only car on the highway, he slowed to 55. It was nearly 14 years since he'd been nailed for speeding, though he had in the meantime been given a warning. Of course, the warning had been delivered while he was still driving his primeval Buick. Not only had the decrepitude of his car inclined the officer's compassion toward clergy in general, but he'd looked pretty astounded that the vehicle could even do 70 in a 55-mile zone. He glanced toward the passenger seat. His travel companion, now occasionally known as the Old Gentleman, was obviously enjoying the wind in his face. Perhaps he should feel guilty about making this trip with his best friend instead of his wife. But hadn't she practically booted him out the door? "Go," she said, hobbling about in her ankle cast. "Go and be as the butterfly." He had tested her a couple of times to make certain he could bust out of there for 5 or 6 days and remain within the loose confines of her goodwill. "What about food supplies, since you can't drive?" "Darling, this is Mitford. They will swarm to bring covered dishes to the wife of their all-time favorite priest." "Swarm, will they?" "Just to be safe, I'll lay in victuals." "Don't, please, just go. Go and be as you already said that." "Well, and I mean it. Butterflies have a very short lifespan. If they're ever going back to Mississippi to settle certain issues of the heart, they have to hop to it. And enjoy the trip while they're at it, of course." His wife was a children's book author and illustrator and had her own way of looking at things. "What about the trash?" "Sammy or Kenny will carry it out. They're right next door. Or even Harley will do it. I can't even make enough trash for all those fellas to carry out." "What if you get, scared or something?" "Scared or something? Have you ever known me to be scared or something?" He had, actually, but they'd been lost in a wild cave at the time. She'd given him that grin of hers and blasted him with the cornflower blue of her eyes. And here he was. Kudzu. Everywhere. He didn't even remember such vast stretches of his old terrain being carpeted with the stuff. It was seldom seen in the mountains of North Carolina. Too cold, he supposed, for the flowering perennial vine from the Orient. It was the boiling summers and the mild winters of Mississippi that worked the charm. What the government had planted in the 30s to prevent erosion had done its job, and then some. He turned the radio on and roamed the dial looking for a country station. This wasn't a Mozart kind of trip. "I'm going to Jackson, and that's a fact. Yeah, we're going to Jackson. Ain't ever coming back." Johnny Cash and June Carter were going to Jackson. He was going to Holly Springs. He hung a right at the first exit to his hometown, relieved that he hadn't felt it yet. The surge of sorrow or dread or even cold disinterest that he'd feared since the note arrived and he decided to make this journey. As they drove out of Mitford yesterday morning, he'd steeled himself for the appearance of some long-suppressed emotion that would overtake him straight out of the box. But it hadn't happened. It might have assailed him last night in the motel room more than 500 miles from his wife, as he crawled, unwilling, beneath a blanket reeking of stale tobacco smoke. There'd also been a window of opportunity this morning when, downing an egg biscuit on the south side of Memphis, he'd felt suddenly panicked, ready to get behind the wheel and head back the way he'd come. But he'd caught such feelings red-handed and refused to give in to them. What he was doing had to be done, even if it produced despair, which was probable, or grief, which was likely, or anger, which was almost certain. A few stores.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?